Hello and welcome to another Blood Red podcast special after a busy transfer deadline day for Liverpool FC, in which they've secured not one but two central defenders. Ben Davies, as we reported yesterday, was the first. I did a podcast with Guy Clark all about him, which you can listen to or watch if you want to know more about the Preston centre-half. Liverpool have got deals done this month for 16-year-old Derby County attacker Kai Gordon and 19-year-old goalkeeper Liam Hughes from Celtic. I think it's fair to say, though, that the most exciting deal of the lot is the loan deal with an option of an £18 million summer purchase for Schalke centre-back Ozan Kabak. The deal comes with Joel Matip ruled out for the remainder of the 2020-2021 campaign with ankle ligament damage sustained against Tottenham. Elsewhere, at the time of recording, it looks like Takumi Minamino might be heading to Southampton on loan. That may well be confirmed and finalised by the time you're listening to this show. That would, of course, link him up back with Saints boss Ralph Hasenhüttl, another Red Bull link with Liverpool, with Minamino signing 12 months ago, of course, from Red Bull Salzburg, and the Austrian, a former Leipzig manager. The focus of this podcast, though, is to get the lowdown on Ozan Kabak, the biggest incoming at Anfield this January.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
I'm delighted to say that joining me to give us the lowdown on Ozan Kabak is Bundesliga reporter and football journalist for Goal, Ronan Murphy. Ronan, thank you for joining me. Appreciate you jumping onto the Blood Red podcast with us. I suppose the obvious place to start, really, is to ask just how excited Liverpool fans should be about Ozan Kabak.
Yeah, I think in the long term they should be excited, especially if Liverpool decide to activate the option they have for him to purchase him. Perhaps at the moment he mightn't be a superstar straight away, but sure, when you sign a 20-year-old, especially when you sign a 20-year-old at the last day of the transfer window, he's not going to immediately be Virgil van Dijk or anything, but I think he's definitely going to be a confident and competent centre-back for Liverpool, especially during this injury crisis. So he's a good pick-up for the now, and he'll be a good kind of band-aid for the backline problems at the moment. But I think he definitely has great potential, and under someone like Jurgen Klopp, he can really kind of grow and flourish.
Yeah, still only 20, of course, loads and loads of potential. But I mean, is he ready to make that impact straight away? Because, I mean, essentially, as you say, that injury crisis, that is what Liverpool are going to need from him.
Yeah, I think he can. I think he has enough experience at Schalke to kind of prove that he can compete at a top level in a top European league. I know Schalke have been struggling, and you had Paul Merson on Sky Sports on Monday kind of saying that I heard he was physical, and he was kind of worried about that. But you might call Virgil van Dijk physical as well, and that wouldn't be a concern at all. So I think he definitely will be able to step up straight away, and it shouldn't be too much of a kind of a leap, for him, because I think one of the things you hear from players that move from the Bundesliga to the Premier League is that it's a much more physical league. But because he's a strong player, he's good in the air, he's good at tackles, he's good in duels and one-on-ones, he shouldn't have those same problems maybe that some other players like Timo Werner obviously was flagging it earlier in the season, that of kind of adjusting or adapting to playing in the Premier League. So I think he will kind of take to it a bit more quickly than some players, and he mightn't have maybe the bedding in time that you might see other players in Klopp systems need, because he's a centre-back rather than a midfielder like Naby Keita or something like that.
What would you say is the player's biggest strength? What do you think has attracted Liverpool to him?
Yeah, I think it is that kind of imposing. He is that statuesque kind of defender. He's a big kind of presence at the back, and he will be kind of an intimidating opponent for Premier League forwards to come up against. And I think that maybe is something that Liverpool are lacking at the moment, when they have so many centre backs out that they're being forced to play midfielders in defence, and maybe they're not the kind of same kind of old school defenders that you might have been used to. So I think his kind of being good in the air and being good on the ground and being good kind of in those close situations when he needs to make a tackle, he will stand to him, and maybe it'll be a good kind of counterpart for Virgil van Dijk when he's fit again, because we know Van Dijk never needs to tackle, so maybe to have someone who's able to put in that last ditch tackle beside a Van Dijk who's all about positioning could end up working perfectly and be a great partnership.
How good is Ozan Kabak on the ball in terms of being able to bring it out? How good and how strong is his passing ability?
I'm not sure we kind of saw the best of that, especially this season with Schalke, because they've just been so poor since kind of last January. They've only kind of got one win in the last year, so it's hard to tell from that. And when you're giving it to players that are kind of mediocre, it's obviously hard to tell. So the stats kind of don't add up to him having a broad range of passing or anything. But he seems to be able to. In the previous season, he showed signs that he could pass it out from the back, and he was fond of a long ball, and a lot of his kind of longer balls would connect maybe more so than many defenders, and I think his numbers there were good. So you kind of hope that when he gets to be able to play with better players, that he should be able to become a better passer.
Is there any sort of obvious weakness within his game, or anything that he needs to sort of improve, would you say?
I think obviously confidence might be a problem. and that will be a thing in a team that are obviously under pressure, and that much kind of that results aren't going their way, that sometimes maybe he can switch off in games and maybe he can be a bit inconsistent. But like when Schalke are under so much pressure and they're losing game after game and they were finding it so hard to win, it was going to be tough for any player to perform in that sort of environment. And you just look at Weston McKennie last season, and he was one of Schalke's better players kind of after the restart, but you wouldn't have thought he was going to pull up any trees when he moved to Juventus, and people like to throw back in my face that I made a jokey comment to a colleague at the time that he wasn't good enough for Southampton, never mind Juventus. I was joking that he didn't seem like a kind of quality midfielder that Juventus usually would have signed. He didn't fit the profile. He was kind of a Swiss Army knife sort of utility player, but he's kind of shown that why Juventus signed him, and he's proven to be one of their best players this season. So I think you could see this similar happening with Kabak. It could be just natural progression from a team that were having difficulties to a team that are challenging for a title, and he should be able to kind of shine, and it shouldn't take him too long to step up.
Yeah, certainly a lot easier, of course, when you're playing in a team of better players. I mean, Liverpool fans probably haven't seen a great deal of Ozan Kabak. Is there a player maybe stylistically that you would say he's a little bit similar to, even if he's not at the same level necessarily? Is there somebody who is an obvious comparison out there that people might know?
I'd say from the Liverpool squad, maybe he's like a mix between a Joel Matip or a Dejan Lovren. That sort of player, maybe obviously quicker than Lovren. I think myself might be quicker than Lovren, but I think he's just kind of he's a kind of a more old school centre back than maybe we have seen in recent years, and that's obviously what Paul Merson doesn't like. But I think he has the pace to go with it, with the physical attributes that he has, and maybe the kind of all-round game will come in time, and he'll become more confident in the ball, and maybe Jurgen Klopp will make him more confident in the ball and take him under the wing. So yeah, it's kind of hard to pigeonhole him, obviously, but he definitely will be an interesting addition, and I'll be intrigued to see how he gets on in the first few weeks and games.
How likely do you think it is that Liverpool will trigger that option? I think it's 18 million or so that they could buy in the summer. Do you think they've probably got intentions of doing that?
Yeah, I would think so. It seems a kind of reasonable fee, especially considering the amounts that were quoted even earlier in the transfer window, or even last summer there was talk of 30 million at one stage. So I think 18 million seems kind of a bargain for a player of his potential, and even if it could be one of these things that they could activate it and end up selling them on, like you seen Man City do with Angelino. So that kind of a move that even if it didn't work out, you should definitely get a return on your investment there, because there's always a market for young, talented centre backs with a lot of upside. So even if he wasn't to be a huge success, or Van Dijk comes back and maybe they might make a move for a bigger defender, an Upamecano type in the summer, maybe they could activate it and then decide to maybe give him a year or two and sell him on then.
I noticed he was suspended earlier in the season for 5 games for a spitting incident against Werder Bremen. I mean, what's the story behind that? At the time, he appeared to claim that was accidental. Is that an explanation that's been accepted over in Germany?
I don't think it has. I think it kind of looked like it looked on purpose, but at the same time, I think it's something that he regretted perhaps, and that's something that he would have learned from, especially because of the punishment that he got for it was so harsh, and you kind of get less for racism in Germany, which is kind of disgraceful. But that's a different point for a different show. But yeah, I think he's moved on and he's learned from it. And even though he kind of saying that it wasn't intentional, hopefully it's something that he can put behind him, and discipline issues won't be something that'll crop up in the near future and going forward.
Yeah, certainly not something that Jurgen Klopp would tolerate, I don't think. Just finally, before we let you go, Fabrizio Romano and a few others have sort of reported that Dayot Upamecano would still be of interest to Liverpool in the summer. There's been reports about his RB Leipzig teammate Ibrahima Konate as well. I mean, how does Ozan Kabak compare to those two players? And do you think long-term Liverpool would have more of an eye on the Leipzig pair than possibly keeping Kabak?
I'd say he'd compare more to Konate than Upamecano. Upamecano, he's kind of been tipped as the next Van Dijk, and obviously that's a ridiculous comparison to compare for any player. It's like saying, "Oh, this guy's going to be the next Messi or the next Ronaldo." It's just impossible to live up to. But of all the potential of any defender in the Bundesliga, Upamecano has the highest. So you could see a bidding war, kind of, well, not necessarily a bidding war, but a transfer war, because he has a release clause in the summer, a transfer war to try and get his services. And I think Bayern are trying to get him wrapped up in the next few weeks, because David Alaba is obviously on the move this summer. He's not going to sign a new deal. So I think they're trying to get that completed sooner rather than later. So sort of like Liverpool or Chelsea, who Karl-Heinz Rummenigge said were bought in for him, and his agent also mentioned Man United. So when you have teams like that, you can see why Bayern Munich are trying to kind of pull the trigger immediately. So Liverpool would be probably the best defender on the market this summer, but whether he gets it this summer is a different question altogether.
Yeah, certainly going to be a fascinating transfer window in the summer as well as January. So, yeah, thank you very much, Ronan. Some brilliant insight there from Goals Ronan Murphy. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm sure you've got a fair few Liverpool fans even more excited than they already are about Ozan Kabak.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's a pleasure.
That's all we've got time for on this episode of the show, but there'll be plenty more time to reflect on transfer deals as well as build up to Liverpool versus Brighton on Wednesday over the next couple of days. For now, though, from myself, Matt Addison, and my guest, Goals Ronan Murphy, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and until next time, it's goodbye for now.